Radical Islamic terrorism has been and still is a major problem all over the world. Dating back to the 1900s, these acts have hardly ceased in frequency or severity. Examples of Islamic terrorism can be found everywhere. For the sake of this documentary, we are going to focus on three specific regions: North America, Europe, and the Middle East.
North America has had no shortage of terrorist attacks. For the most part, these attacks have been focused at the United States. Many attacks have been carried out by terrorist cells, mainly Al-Qaeda, against the U.S. The most notable attacks on the U.S. are the 9/11 hijackings. On September 11, 2001, 19 Al-Qaeda associates hijacked airlines and crashed into the World Trade Centers in the Pentagon, killing almost 3,000 people. Since then, the U.S. has been combating terrorism abroad and domestic. Terrorism is prominent in not only North America, but Europe too.
Europe has become a more recent target for terrorism. When immigrants began flooding into Europe from war-ridden countries, terrorists flooded in with them. This has left the countries of Europe struggling to deal with the constant flow of immigrants while having to defend against the possibility of terrorists entering the countries. Many countries have failed to do this and as a result have been subject to attacks. These attacks in Europe are a direct result of immigrant flow into Europe. This leads straight back to the Middle East and leaves us with a question: why are so many people leaving the Middle East? The Middle East can be a hotspot for terrorism. Many of the terror groups have formed here, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. These groups were formed on some ideology against Western nations and to spread the idea of radical Islam. These groups basically attacked and raided cities and other known locations domestically and internationally. In 2012, a civil war broke out in Syria between the Sunni rebels and the Shiite government. During the middle of the war, an Islamic terrorist group called ISIS, which means the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, was formed. Many Muslims opposed the idea of terrorism, but their voices were not heard over the constant rule of these evil groups. The opposition often results in them immigrating from their home country.
The main terrorist organization we will be focusing on is ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban. Each of these groups have caused numerous problems around the globe, against basically anyone that opposes them. Sounds kind of extreme, right? Or maybe radical. ISIS was formed in 1999 from the Sunni terrorist group Al-Qaeda, which we will get to later. More specifically, it was started by the Jordanian Islamist Abu Musab. However, in 1999, the group combined with the more well-known Al-Qaeda to form the Islamic State of Iraq. When the U.S. began to withdraw the troops from Iraq in 2009, ISI only increased the number of terrorist attacks it was responsible for. Since then, ISIS has been more responsible for numerous terrorist attacks, including the nightclub attack in Florida. Obviously, these attacks need to be stopped. Would you want to have the constant fear of attack? I would not think so.
Al-Qaeda is probably one of the most active terror groups. It is a well-controlled and well-maintained organization that carries out attacks against many Western nations, including the United States. It was formed in 1988 by terrorist leader Osama bin Laden and two other volunteers that fought against the Soviets in their invasion of Afghanistan in the 80s. It began as a network to organize attacks against the Soviets. Once the war ended, Al-Qaeda somewhat dispersed for a while but continued to corrupt regimes and foreign presence in other Islamic nations. In 1996, the headquarters of Al-Qaeda were officially reinstated in Sudan with the assistance of another extreme Islamic militia, the Taliban. Since its re-establishment, Al-Qaeda has declared a holy war on the United States. This war includes terror attacks on people of the U.S. How would you feel if a terrorist attack occurred every day in your country? Would you feel worried for yourself and your family?
Speaking of the Taliban, one group in the Middle East that's quite prevalent and powerful is the Taliban, which also refers to itself as the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. It was founded by Mullah Muhammad Omar in Kandahar with 50 students in 1994. The name Taliban comes from the word Talib, meaning religious studies, since that's what it was founded upon, and was founded by Mullah Muhammad Omar. The Pakistani government supported the Taliban in hopes for a new ruling power that favors Pakistan. The Taliban took Kabul in 1996 with support from Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, and by 1998 they controlled 90% of Afghanistan. In 2001, the United States and its allies invaded Afghanistan because it harbored Osama bin Laden. The US and their allies were able to greatly reduce the power of the Taliban, and in 2016 they only controlled 10% of Afghanistan.
Radical Islamic terrorism in the United States is defined as the systematic use of violence in order to intimidate a population or government by radical, extreme Muslims. Their ideology includes violence and terror in order to spread their motive. People that do not agree with the view of these people, such as ISIS or Al-Qaeda, are not considered for a second. These groups will not tolerate any opposition to their cause. In order to spread their views, they plan and carry out systematic terror attacks on the people of the world in every nation, including North America. It is obvious this needs to be stopped as soon as possible. Everyone is familiar with the 9/11 attacks, correct? These attacks were carried out by members of Al-Qaeda. Imagine the horror people must have felt seeing aircrafts run into buildings full of innocent people. Of course, this is not going unnoticed by the United States. The United States has implemented numerous international sanctions and used military force against the terrorists. Still to this day, the US struggles to maintain the terrorist cells, but nevertheless have made advances.
Out of all three of these terrorist groups, ISIS has had the biggest effect on Europe. There has been certainly no change of ISIS attacks on France, but one attack that stands out above all the others is the 2015 Paris shootings. On November 13th, shooters killed 130 people, including 89 at the Bataclan Theater. Another 41 people were injured and almost 100 were seriously harmed. The terrorists attacked a total of 6 locations armed with AK-47s, including the Stade de France, which is a soccer stadium which was in use at the time of the shootings, and various restaurants around Paris. Imagine riding the bus home from work from a long day of work, looking out the bus and seeing a man standing in the street shooting people. I know this may seem like an unreal horror, but this is something that truly happened for some people living in Paris. France is not the only country in Europe to be affected by terrorism. In fact, even the European Union has gotten involved in counterterrorism. The European Union really began the counterterrorism drive in 2015. The EU declared that existing rules would be strengthened. However, it wasn't until December 2017 when the European Parliament called EU members to adopt the proposed directive at first reading. A few aims were to prevent the use of the financial system for the funding of criminal activities and to strengthen transparency rules to prevent the large-scale concealment of funds.
Since 9/11, airport security has been of extreme focus. Before 9/11, security is relatively relaxed. Checkpoints were not as prominent and the searches were not as thorough. Scanning machines such as X-rays and metal detectors were not even a thing. Now, airport security has increased dramatically. To start, doors to the flight deck of airplanes have been reinforced to prevent hijacks. Carry-on sizes have also been reduced and the volume of liquids have also been shrunk.
It may seem like radical terrorism in the Middle East has been going on for a long time. Modern Islamic terrorism was only started in the late 1960s by some factions of the Palestinian Liberation Organization while fighting Israel after failed attempts to defeat Israel in normal warfare. After the attacks on September 11th at the World Trade Center, America declared war on terror and invaded Afghanistan and toppled the Taliban from power. The US also assassinated Osama bin Laden in Pakistan on May 1st, 2011, and continued fighting terrorism in the Middle East. In 2012, a civil war broke out in Syria between Sunni rebels and the Shiite government, and in the middle of this war, an Islamic terrorism group called ISIS, which stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, was formed. Most Muslims do not support radical Islamic terrorism as they believe it is a perversion of their faith. Terrorism has also led to people fleeing their homes, many innocent deaths, the destruction of historical monuments, and more.
With all the terrorist groups being around, countries are having to take action to protect themselves. France, for example, has enacted new policies to prevent acts of terrorism from occurring. Some policies include deployment of security forces around the country, especially to public locations such as airports. In May of 2016, the French government officially developed a counterterrorism plan. The plan had many factors such as increased surveillance on known radicals, the deployment of hotlines for people to report family or neighbors who may be becoming radicalized, and the activation of a system to record airline PNRs, passenger name records.
The United States has been fighting terrorism abroad since 9/11. Less than a week after the attacks, President Bush ordered for the use of military force against terrorists. This order would turn into a long-standing war on terrorism. The U.S. would establish a military presence in the Middle East, specifically Iraq and Afghanistan. The main target was the leader of the Al-Qaeda terrorist group, Osama bin Laden, who had escaped the U.S. on multiple occasions. Eventually, the United States Special Forces found Osama bin Laden and took the shot. On May 1st, 2011, Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, was assassinated by U.S. Special Forces in Pakistan. Countries worldwide have tried many solutions to fix the problem of terrorism, but to no avail. We, however, have proposed a prototype plan that could possibly fix the issue in the world regions that we have researched. It is not a definite fix, but it may help nonetheless.
To begin, countries most affected by terrorism should severely reduce, maybe even prohibit, immigration of any kind. Terrorist incidents have occurred an immense amount of times from illegal and sometimes legal immigrants. Reducing immigration would definitely help solve the issue, but would not be enough to stop it. Secondly, countries should require mandatory screenings for citizens. These screenings would include a thorough background check of any criminal records. If a citizen does not comply with said screenings, he or she will be given a notice about it. If compliance is still not achieved, they will be asked to leave the country. This is somewhat harsh, but it is necessary to ensure the safety for honest citizens. Lastly, foreign affairs with countries, especially in the Middle East, should be cut. International affairs have not helped very much, and if anything, have caused issues that build tension between countries. Our plan is long and somewhat harsh, but it is necessary to ensure safety. Terrorism is a major problem, and it must be stopped.
Can be a hotspot for terrorism. Many of the terror groups have formed here.
Dude, stop!
Dude!
David!
Yeah,
Alright, shoot. Okay. Oh, what are you doing?